Hello, everybody. I'm Tanya Zanets. I'm Youth Program Coordinator, and I'm coming from an organization called Civic Initiatives. The topic of the session is actually citizen participation, and I'm coming from the organization who's actually having this as a key word in what we are doing, in our mission, in our activities, and my specifically focus is on youth. So somehow our mission is to strengthen civil society through education, promotion of democracy and active citizenship. And we start somehow to work in 96. So it passed more, in 96 actually, when our colleagues and the people who was very much involved in civic movements and specifically in anti-war movements somehow decide to create an organization who will somehow support and enhance participants, citizens to fight against the regime in that way, to go outside from the big cities to the small areas and support any kind of activities of the citizens that citizens at that place recognize as important for them. I can say that we have two phases in our development as an organization, and somehow the borderline was 2000 and the swift of the regime. Until 2000, we tried to support civic education, civic participation, civic activism anywhere in the local communities. But after that, we actually start to make some focus and to recognize what is our main targets and how to develop some specifically programs for that specific target. So we have developed and still continue something that we started before, civil society development program. We start to develop civic education program to be more involved in schools because we see that this is an area where we can make much of the impact. And we develop inter-ethnic programs since we still recognize that the ethnic minorities will need to be supported. And the last but not the least is the youth program. Actually, we recognize the youth as one of the marginalized group and one of the most vulnerable group in society that needs some kind of support. And the program, youth program actually is my area, and I'm developing youth programs since 2000. Whatever we was doing until 2000 and after 2000, actually, the word is the citizen participation, and that's something that we try to support in different way and different networks, mostly through education, but also through networking, through support of fundraising for the organization, and we are also one of the hosts of one of the biggest network of the NGOs here in a country called FANS, that actually has more than 400 members. I will try to somehow show you how we did and support all this year actually youth participation through the institution mostly and through different kind of processes in different phases of during this actually period of 10 years. I could say that again we have somehow two ways how we used to work as a youth program with the youth. One is from 2000 to 2007. In that period, we actually recognize youth, as I said at the beginning, as one of the most marginalized group. And my colleague after that will speak how it was actually important to, after the period of the war, the economic crisis, actually to really recognize those groups who was most marginalized and most affected by all these problems. And for sure, youth was one of them. I think that if we speak about youth in 2000, one word could mostly describe the position. It was actually that they were invisible. Invisible in media, invisible in institutions, invisible in policies. Actually, nobody was dealing with the youth. If you try to get some data about the youth at that time, I will give you just a few of them whom I would say quite speak about the position of youth, is that the unemployment is more than 50% in general, speaking about youth from 20 to 30, that we speak about the youth who was completely isolated with extremely low mobility, and some data was speaking about 70% of the student students didn't actually have a passport. To some of our surveys shows that the people, about 50% of youth, have never left the country. If you speak about economically, I mean youth who is actually living separate for the families, then you have only 7% of youth who would like to live and has an opportunity to live and somehow alone before they start marrying, getting in marriage. So if you speak in general, the youth was quite marginalized, and in that perspective, we as a program try to actually use, in a way, youth involvement to support them to change their own position in the society. That was also the issue, how to define the youth. Since there was no state definition of the youth, we as a program defined youth from 70 to 30, 28 then to 30. And we developed a program for these age groups. We started with the high school students, but then we recognized that if we want to have higher impact, then we need to involve more and to involve everybody, involve the people who have some skills actually to help youth to organize themselves, to recognize themselves as a social group and to make some impact to the state. What was actually important, I will show you the way this small picture shows how we used to work with the youth. Our somehow strategy was really to enhance youth participation again. I said again because the youth was very active during the period up to 2000, and for sure some of you heard about resistance, about youth groups who were organizing, doing many kind of activities against the regime at that time. But what happened, and I would say that at the time we quite inspired because I was young, much younger at that time, and I grew up through this process as well as a person. I would say that really youth inspired this big turnover in 2000 somehow and give the credibility of the opposition among the citizens. And actually this at the beginning, small movement become the big, etc. So it's possible, and there was still a knowledge and remember of the youth that they can be active. But after 2000, the first response to that of the state administration was to close the ministry, who was the federal ministry, who was dealing with the youth, and somehow it was also a big message to the youth how the state is going to deal with them. So also the youth activism was quite reduced, and we recognized that if we try again to somehow motivating to be active and to fight for themselves, that as they can get something, and we can ask or we can expect some change of the perception of the youth on the level of the society, but also some concrete impact on new position and the quality of life of the youth in the state. The other way is not to if we didn't actually support them to participate, was to wait until the state will actually recognize that they need to do something. So as an organization, I would say that we were active in many kind of coalition, and here I see a representative of some coalition that we were active in this fight of 7 years. Somehow our joint aim was to establish the first institution who would deal with the youth. So that's why I would say, as I said in the beginning, somehow the keyword of this first phase of us as an organization and youth program was to advocating for the building institutions. And I think that experience that we have from this period is quite valued, because comparing to what we were shared with especially countries in the West Europe, is that we have experienced how to build institutions, and it's a kind of privileges of the state in transition. I would say the privileges, because sometimes it's harder to deal and to participate in the work of very strong institutions, but we passed the process of the building institutions, and somehow it turns in our case quite well towards us. I would say that our activities the most on the national level was mostly through the coalition. It was the Youth Coalition of Serbia, and since 2003 to 2007, actually, we was fighting to get the first institution for the youth. Our main activities as the coalition and also as the organization was also on the local level, where we tried to different kind of programs, educational, like a Becoming a Citizen program, and the program of support of the local advocacy, like a youth and social action program to raise awareness in the local community and somehow to build the youth capacity of the youth groups through all these activities and somehow to make some change on the local level. Usually, I would say that after the program that we developed, mostly in one community, 1 to 2 or 3 years, depends on funds, actually brought some kind of changes on the personal development for each of the participants, but also we strengthening and make more numbering the youth groups, and I think that it quite helped to change the perception of the community about the youth and about seeing why it's necessary to work with youth. On the national level, I think that Youth Coalition of Serbia was the most affecting, and also we as an organization, we see that this was one of the really models that other maybe civil sector can learn from. This is the way how we make this institution to be somehow built and to be established in society of Serbia, which was very transitional society with many change and shifts of the governments, and it was really hard to put youth as an agenda on the national agenda for one side, and on the other side actually to have a stable decision makers that you can really negotiate with, because they was changing quite a lot in this period. This what we was doing on the local level actually, and as a coalition we were supporting many local coalitions to be built, and for sure this base that we create was very important for what was doing on the national level. On the national level, we mostly advocating just to bring at the first phase, just to bring this topic on agenda, but then actually we was having quite a lot of activities trying to bring the decision maker to speak and to talk to us. I will give you an example of one of activities, but Dušica, you can join and also give your overview of how we work as a Youth Coalition of Serbia at this moment. Since nobody went on the national level from the governments to speak to us, we upon one occasion on the conference when they didn't come, even if they were called to come, we decided that it was about, 41 towns involved to organize the activities of stopping the work of the government for one day. For example, we all organize as youth groups, and I think it was 177 youth groups from 41 towns with more than 60,000 youth activists who were involved. We called the Prime Minister office, the President office, the Ministry of Finances, Ministry of Education, and all political party central office from 8 to 5, and we blocked their work. It was only one question, and it was the question of, is this Ministry of Youth? At this time. And I think this kind of activities actually brought attention to the public, because it has a huge coverage by the media. Media here are quite working this way to be sensationalistic. No? And on the other side, it was actually also somehow a message to the governments that it happened in 95. So it was in the half of the way. First, 2005, sorry. It was in the half of the way to our campaign. And first, we was really building the local, how should I say, the base and the local groups, and how try to change something in the small level on the local community. And it was very hard to attack that. And I think that these kind of activities where we used to block the work of the government, and they start to speak with us, because the Prime Minister at the time, Vojislav Koštunica, called the Ministry of Education and delegate him to